The room was too quiet for a wedding night, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until your heart starts filling the space. White rose petals lay scattered across the bed, the city lights flickering through sheer curtains like nothing in my life was wrong. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't explain why. Every instinct in my body was screaming that I wasn't safe. If you've ever felt that moment where something looks perfect but feels deeply wrong, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. You're not alone in that feeling. I remember standing there, barefoot on cold marble, realizing that love doesn't warn you before it turns. That night, I had just become a wife, but I was already being positioned as something else entirely. A solution, a distraction, a shield. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything I believed about my marriage began to unravel. I became a wife only a few hours before I realized my life might already be in danger. That thought settled into my chest as I stood alone in a luxury hotel suite overlooking the dark water of Puget Sound. The room was flawless, soft lighting, white flowers scattered across the bed, everything designed to celebrate love. I had just married Daniel Morgan. Until that night, I was a public preschool teacher with no family to lean on, no safety net, no name that opened doors. Suddenly, I was someone's wife, wrapped in comfort that didn't belong to me yet. I kept telling myself this was what security felt like, but my body refused to believe it. From the balcony, I watched Daniel step away to take a call. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw locked. Whatever warmth he carried earlier drained from him in seconds. I couldn't hear a word, but fear doesn't need sound to speak. It crawled up my spine and settled behind my eyes. I told myself I was imagining things. New nerves, new marriage, new life. Still, my hands were shaking when I smoothed the sheets. My breath felt shallow. The room was too quiet, like it was holding something back. That was the moment I understood this night wasn't a fairy tale at all anymore. I was still standing there, trying to slow my breathing, when the door behind me opened too fast. The sound alone shattered whatever calm I was pretending to have. When I turned, I saw Lily, Daniel's younger sister, and the fear on her face stopped my heart. She looked like someone running out of time. Her skin was pale, her hands shaking so hard she struggled to hold what she carried. Before I could form a thought, she pressed a thick bundle of cash into my hands. It was heavy, warm, and completely out of place on a wedding night. My mind raced. Why money? Why now? Why me? Every instinct told me this was not generosity. It was urgency. I could feel her panic without a single word being spoken. This wasn't drama or emotion spilling over. This was practiced fear, the kind learned by people who know exactly what happens when they wait too long. My pulse thundered in my ears as I realized she wasn't asking me to leave later. She was trying to get me out immediately. I glanced toward the balcony, toward the man I had just married, and something inside me cracked. If this family believed I needed escape money on my wedding night, then this marriage had never been about love. It had been arranged around silence, timing, and control, and that truth settled in my chest like a warning I couldn't ignore. I keep going back to the beginning, trying to understand how I missed what now feels obvious. When I met Daniel, he didn't see me as someone disposable. I was an orphan, a preschool teacher who had learned to stand alone early, and he treated that independence like something precious. He paid attention in ways that felt rare. He remembered small things about my days, my routines, my fears. Around him, I felt chosen, not rescued. That distinction mattered to me more than I realized at the time. When I told him I had no family, I didn't hear pity in his response. I felt certainty. I believed we would build something stable, something safe, from the ground up. Looking back, I can see how deeply I needed that promise to be true. There were moments when his powerful family pushed back against us. I remember how firmly he positioned himself between me and their disapproval. I mistook that for bravery. I thought love was what made him stand his ground. Now, with distance, I see something else layered beneath it. Control can wear the same shape as protection. Defiance can exist alongside obedience. The line between them is thinner than I ever understood. That night, standing in that hotel room, I began to sense that the man I trusted and the world he came from were not separate at all. It felt like the first hairline crack in a picture I had framed as perfect, even though my instincts had been warning me long before that night alone inside. I arrived at the Morgan family estate the next morning, and the place felt less like a home and more like a checkpoint. Tall gates, silent cameras, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, just watchful. Every step I took echoed, as if the house wanted to remind me I was being noticed. Daniel's father dominated the space without raising his voice. His presence alone carried weight, the kind that makes people adjust themselves without being asked. I felt measured, not welcomed, like my value was being assessed in real time. His mother moved differently, polite, composed, careful with every expression. Her kindness stayed on the surface, never quite reaching her eyes. It felt practiced, as if warmth was something she rationed. Lily barely spoke. She hovered at the edges of rooms, shrinking herself smaller than necessary. I saw how often her eyes searched faces before she moved, as if permission mattered more than comfort. The wealth was undeniable. The furniture, the land, the security. But none of it felt safe. It felt controlled. I realized then that silence wasn't accidental here. It was enforced, rewarded, and expected. That house didn't run on love or trust. It survived on what went unsaid. And once I noticed that, I couldn't stop wondering what truths had been buried to keep everything so quiet. That realization stayed with me longer than I expected. I woke up to sunlight pouring through the windows, pretending nothing had changed. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Daniel had already left, and the calm felt staged, almost mocking. I couldn't shake the pull toward Lily's room. Fear pushed me forward, even as my instincts told me to stop. I knocked once, then again, and when no one answered, I stepped inside. Her room was empty, the bed unmade, books scattered like she'd left in a hurry. That was when I saw the notebook on her desk. It was open, as if it had been waiting for me. I hesitated before touching it, my hands already trembling. The pages were filled with her handwriting, uneven and heavy, soaked with fear. I didn't read words so much as emotions. Each line carried urgency, regret, and something darker. I understood she wasn't confused. She was warning me. She believed someone powerful had done something unforgivable. Worse, she believed Daniel knew. My stomach dropped as the meaning settled in. This wasn't family tension or jealousy. It was evidence of harm, silence, and control. I closed the notebook and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. Once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. I knew then that leaving quietly was no longer an option. Whatever the Morgans were hiding had already cost lives, and now that truth was sitting in my hands. If I stayed silent, I would become part of it. So I opened my laptop and I started searching, because fear had turned into certainty, and certainty demands answers. I was done guessing, done hoping, and ready to find out what had been buried, no matter how dangerous that path became. For all of us. I sat alone with my laptop long after the house had gone quiet. The glow of the screen felt harsh in the dark room, but I couldn't stop. Fear had sharpened my focus. I searched names, companies, locations, anything tied to the Morgan fortune. At first, everything looked polished. Awards, charity events, smiling photos, the kind of public image money buys easily. Then I changed my search terms. I stopped looking for praise and started looking for accidents. That's when I found it. A construction site collapse from years earlier. Several workers killed. Official reports blamed weather and bad luck. But the deeper I went, the more the story unraveled. Articles vanished. Comments were disabled. Families spoke briefly, then disappeared from the record. I felt sick as I realized how it worked. Settlements paid quietly, inspectors reassigned, journalists pressured. Money didn't just soften consequences, it erased them. One detail stopped my breath. Daniel had been involved, not as the mastermind, but as a witness. He had been there. He had seen what happened and stayed silent. That truth hurt more than the crime itself. Silence wasn't neutrality. It was participation. It allowed the lie to survive. I closed my laptop and pressed my hands into my face, trying to steady myself. This wasn't gossip or scandal. Real people had died. Their families had been silenced, and I had married into the center of it. Whatever choice I made next would matter. Running wouldn't undo the harm. Staying quiet would make me complicit. I understood then that this wasn't about protecting myself anymore. It was about deciding what kind of person I was willing to be. Now that the truth had a name and a body count, and once seen, that truth demanded action, no matter the cost to me personally. The message came quietly, from a number I didn't recognize, asking me to meet away from the house. I almost ignored it. Fear makes you cautious like that. But something in me knew this wasn't a trap. It was a crack. I met Daniel's mother in a small cafe near the water, far from cameras and gates. She looked different there, smaller. Her hands shook as she kept scanning the room, as if even air could betray her. That was when I understood she wasn't calm by nature. She was controlled by fear. She let the truth surface slowly. She had known about the deaths for years. She had watched silence become survival inside that family. Speaking up meant losing everything, including her children. Fear wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Then she told me why the wedding had happened so fast. The marriage wasn't about love or timing, it was about containment. If Daniel had a wife and a future, he was less likely to speak. And I had been chosen because I had no powerful family, no lawyers waiting in the wings, no one who could fight back if things went wrong. I felt the weight of that realization sink deep into my chest. I wasn't protected, I was convenient. She hadn't spoken sooner because she believed silence kept everyone alive. But Lily's warning had broken something in her. Guilt finally outweighed fear. When I left that cafe, the choice in front of me was painfully clear. I could take the money and disappear, or I could stay and confront what had been built on my silence. Walking away would save me. Staying might cost me everything. I sat alone on the edge of the bed, the cash hidden beneath the mattress, knowing it could buy me distance but not peace. Leaving was simple. I could disappear before sunrise and no one would stop me. But every time I imagined walking away, I saw Lily's fear and the families who never got justice. Fear still lived in my body, but it no longer owned me. What frightened me more was the idea of surviving by doing nothing. That night, Lily came to my door. She looked exhausted, but steadier than before. We didn't need to explain ourselves. We both understood the cost of staying and the cost of running. For the first time, I saw something new in her. Resolve. She told me about a spare key hidden in a small memorial room no one used anymore, a room filled with photographs and silence. The key opened her father's study, the place where secrets were kept and erased. As she spoke, my decision settled fully. This wasn't bravery, it was responsibility. If I left, the truth would stay buried. If I stayed, at least it had a chance to breathe. I agreed to help her, not because I believed we were safe, but because fear had finally stopped being my guide. We chose the night because darkness hid movement and silence covered mistakes. Once that choice was made, there was no returning to who I had been before. I wasn't waiting to be saved anymore. I was stepping into danger, knowing it would change everything for us. The house felt different at night, like it was awake and listening. Every step Lily and I took sounded too loud, even when we barely breathed. We moved slowly through the hallway, shadows stretching across the walls, my heart beating so hard I was sure it could be heard. The memorial room smelled like dust and old flowers, frozen in time, grief displayed but never discussed. Lily reached beneath the small altar and passed me the key with shaking fingers. When the study door opened, the air changed. It was heavier, tighter, like secrets had weight. File cabinets lined the walls, and a safe sat in the corner, locked and silent. I went to the desk instead. The computer glowed faintly when it woke, asking for a password. I tried what mattered most to him, pride. It opened. Inside the folders was proof, video files, reports, records meant to disappear. One recording showed a collapse, voices raised, and calm instructions to remove everything. No witnesses. I felt cold as understanding settled in. This wasn't chaos. It was planned. Lives reduced to problems to be managed. I copied the files onto a small drive, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. That was when headlights swept across the windows. A car door slammed. Footsteps echoed inside the house. Panic hit like a wave. We rushed back through the hallway, every second stretching thin. The truth was in my hand now, undeniable and fragile. As we reached the stairs, a voice cut through the silence, sharp with suspicion. Someone knew. In that moment, I understood the cost of proof. We had secured the truth, but safety was gone. Possession had turned fear into an open threat. There was no hiding anymore. Everything that followed would happen fast, and none of us were ready. Everything unraveled the moment he realized something had been taken. The calm that ruled that house for decades shattered in seconds. Footsteps thundered through the halls, doors slammed. The silence that once controlled everyone turned into shouting, orders, and raw panic. I saw power lose its polish, reduced to fear and rage. When he confronted us, there was no strategy left, only threats. His authority depended on control, and control was gone. The house felt smaller, dangerous, unpredictable. I remember clutching the drive in my hand like it was the only solid thing left. Instinct took over. We ran, down hallways, past locked doors, toward the back of the property where shadows hid movement. I could hear pursuit behind us, close enough to feel breath on my neck. We climbed, fell, got back up. Somewhere in the chaos, someone grabbed my ankle and I hit the ground hard. Pain flared sharp and blinding until another body collided with the attacker and bought me seconds. Those seconds saved everything. We didn't stop until headlights cut through the trees and a passing car slowed. I barely remember getting inside, only repeating where we needed to go. At the police station, time slowed. The officers watched the footage in silence, their faces changing as the truth played out. Sirens followed. Orders were given. For the first time, his power met a system he couldn't command. I sat shaking, relieved we were alive then. I returned to that house later with police permission, and it felt smaller than I remembered. Without secrecy, the walls lost their power. Files were cataloged. Drives were logged. Every move followed procedure, slow and exact. The final evidence came from a journal hidden behind a shelf. Page after page outlined plans, payments, contingencies. Even the idea of claiming instability had been prepared in advance. Reading it stripped away any remaining doubt. This was never chaos. It was strategy. In court, there were no speeches, only records. Timelines aligned, documents spoke. The man who once commanded rooms now sat still, shrinking as his own handwriting closed every exit he had designed. I watched his family absorb the truth in different ways. Silence broke into grief, shame, and relief all at once. There was no celebration, only a heavy exhale, like a storm finally passing. When the verdict came, it felt quiet, not triumphant, just final. Power built on lies doesn't collapse loudly. It erodes until nothing is left to stand on. Truth took its time, but it endured. And once it was seen, it could not be buried again. We walked out knowing the future would be hard, but honest. And that honesty was the only thing that had survived. Life after the trial didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly, morning at a time. We left the house that once felt untouchable and moved into something smaller, something honest. There were no gates, no guards, just space to breathe. Daniel started working with his hands, not his name. Lily went back to school. I returned to teaching, opening a free preschool program for families who needed it. None of it erased the past, but it honored it. We used what little money remained to create a modest fund in the names of the workers who died. It wasn't forgiveness, it was responsibility. Justice didn't give us happiness, it gave us direction. Some days still hurt. Loss doesn't disappear because the truth wins, but it no longer owned us. What survived was clarity, and with it, choice. I learned that courage isn't loud. It's the decision to act when silence would be easier. Truth doesn't rush, but it waits for someone willing to carry it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever faced a moment where doing the right thing cost you safety, share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone with care.